plasma energies are being detected, or at least the indicators we use are showing as though plasma energy is being output from the sun, but we're not having periods of solar flares or particular excited solar activity.
Is it happening more in those areas that you? I mean, because that's
There's
quite
more
personal.
immediate impact on those populations that live closer to the Earth. So, for instance, the reason it's arising in Brazil has to do with the spontaneous bursting into flame of large areas of now rapidly drying out Amazonian vegetation, as well as new problems with the top canopy of the jungle. In many areas that might still have water, the top canopy is wilting, and this has never been seen before.
Jeez. How do you read that, Cliff? What can you foresee coming upon us if it's happening in those areas? I mean, spontaneous fires erupting in the jungle, where obviously that they've decimated so much of it. But then, how would that compare, let's say, to Iraq, Iran, India, again because they live so close to the Earth?
Correct. Many of the places we find have a common denominator in that they are dependent on scarce resources. That is to say, water, because they're rice dependent. And it's unlike growing crops like maize or rapeseed or something. With rice, you have to have that layer of water.
Right.
If you've got a higher degree of solar radiation, the evaporation starts to suddenly stress what was already a delicate balance.
Sure. My gosh. Scary is not even the word when it starts to come down like that. How can you tell? Because I know you will tap into maybe 66 million sites.
We get 66 million or greater reads. The reads might cover anywhere from 1 million sites to 18 million. It is somewhat non-deterministic, and I want to keep it that way.
Okay. How do you know? And if it makes a difference, how do you know if so many of them are just pure BS, disinformation, or misinformation? How do you know?
We don't read them consciously. We don't really care what people are saying to each other. In other words, I happen to know that there's some bespoke references of fear associated with the sun because I've got a little filter set on that kicks out some of this stuff to me. But our processing doesn't care. What it does is it goes out and it reads a conversation.
Right.
And, for instance, we might tell it that the conversation must have the following. It must have a subject under discussion that is outside the bounds of the site at which it is found. And usually we're talking discussion boards, message boards, those kind of things. But you have to understand that we're after stuff that changes. We don't care. For instance, like it would never, our webbots, for instance, wouldn't read my site because I never really post anything on a daily basis.
Okay.
There's not enough churn there to make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
Okay, so once read, it's good forever, really. So what we're after is those places that are very high churn. And I've got like a list of maybe 100,000, 200,000 of the hottest in terms of churn global message boards, and it goes in and reads all the public postings there. And what it's looking for is things where, for instance, in a garden discussion, it would be understandable to find references to the sun, and it picks those up, and if we have a sun entity under development within the run, it'll grab all of those references. But they won't be flagged as high, even though the people that are putting them out there are more sensitive, and thus are going to speak about it on a conscious level with some greater understanding. It's much more meaningful for us to find that sun reference appearing in a telephone lineman or telephone lineman / repair forum, and showing up relating to an emotional thing where a guy says basically, what am I running into here? All of a sudden I got plastic degradation like mad. Is the sun causing this?
My gosh.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
The difference.
Cliff, have you found any indication, and this is a question from one of the listeners, in reference to the status of the sun reaching a point on the photon belt where the coronal reactions have changed?
We pick that up all the time.
Oh, okay.
And there's nothing I can do about that level of scientific data, because even though we get it, and to a certain extent it's just put into a bin, and we sort through it and look at it in a human fashion later on just to see if it doesn't tie into things that are coming up at the emotional level.
Jeez.
In other words, the information is changing, but there you actually have to get into using your discriminating mind to decide, is this accurate? Is it disinformation? What's its source? What's the validity of source? And do these guys know what they're doing? And even if they know what they're doing, are they telling us exactly how they're doing it and reporting correctly and faithfully, or do they have some other agenda? And we don't really go there. The world's just so chock full of people trying to run their own little conspiracies, you spend all of your time chasing them.
What about the fact that so many of the outer planets are warming up? Does anything...
Well, it's certainly not a earthbound phenomenon. We're certainly talking a total solar system event kind of thing.
And that does come up.
Oh yeah.
Any forecast with it?
It's not going back the way it was. How should I say this? Things will progress as they choose to progress, and we know that progression does not include a regression back to a nice, calm, yellow sun period.
Do we know what the ultimate, I won't say end because that sounds really bad. How about in let's say the next X number of years, do we know where this might be taking us?
There's pointers. Let's stop and for a minute place our work in a cultural context.
Yeah.
And let's stop and for instance, say that culture has meaning. Culture has really vital meaning.
Okay.
And part of our culture should be curiosity. And sometime, say in 1940, with the rise of the military-industrial complex controlling everything, especially with the introduction of, by their own term, alien technology, they have altered the nature of the culture and have suppressed information. So the context in which we must do our fiddling around has been altered for 60-plus years. Artificially manipulated, screened, censored, certain concepts deliberately ridiculed, deliberately placed in emotional contexts that make them less meaningful. And so we have this huge background there to go against. Our culture has been subverted by these people doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
As a result of that cultural context, then, we don't necessarily have enough information to be making appropriate guesses at this point about what we're actually seeing showing up.
You happen to mention something just then, and I know we talked about it once before, and that is, and very few people are aware of it, and I have never seen anything else written about it with the possible exception of, and I say probably, of Jim McCanney, who to me is the epitome of what is going on in the scientific community, or should be. And that is the changing color of the sun. It's going from yellow to a very brilliant white.
And maybe beyond that.
Oh.
It may be advancing. What we may be seeing is a progression through the elemental, self-generating, or self-regenerating, what we call natural elements, in which case we would have hydrogen yellow, helium white, and then actually, I don't know if we'd go into deuterium or not, but probably going into blue-white.
Well, which is also the levels of the chakras and the different colors that each of the chakras produce. So you're saying on one level, from a scientific point of view, exactly what so many of the spiritual leaders for the past 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years have been predicting what was going to happen, not only to humanity, but to the universe itself.
And probably that would have a tendency to support our view, then, that it is indeed progressing.
My gosh.
Because we have all that pre-existing evidence.
Yeah. Any comment as to what that will ultimately bring about?
Well, it's going to be change on a scale that is going to be staggering beyond understanding.
In a positive way, I hope.
The problem is that at this point we're picking up a lot of indicators suggesting that long-range emotional trends do not favor stability for the unprepared mind.
I want to get back to that later on tonight.
Okay.
Because the best,
you choose,
the best response and the best show that I enjoyed the most was when you and I got into our, what I would consider very deep conversation on spirituality and some of the things that are there and are coming. I mean, it's just incredible. Cliff, in the runs, and I know it does to a degree, but do you get into the political forecasts as to what is going on around us, what is about to happen to us? And I'm talking about possibly martial law, possibly the on purpose infection of so many of us if we're required to take vaccinations for this make-believe bird flu, or even the bird flu. Do you come up with stuff about that?
We've been coming up with disease indicators since early in the year, that there would be an impact on things and cause restricted movement. As a result, one of the causes would be a disease issue. Our problem is the following.
Yeah.
Let's use a concrete example. George was on my case back a couple of years on.